Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is HawkCast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Go Iowa Awesome and Rivals.com. I'm your recruiting analyst and host, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter, joined by publisher Adam Jacoby and managing editor Ross Binder here on this Monday evening. You're listening more than likely on Tuesday. But before we get started, if you are listening on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Drop a like, drop a comment, let us know what you're thinking about the state of things, women's basketball in particular. And again, if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, you might be listening, but not subscribed. So make sure you hit that subscribe button before we get started. Leave that rate and review, helps us out, and it makes us very happy. Women's basketball. Huge news this afternoon as Lisa Bluder, who has been the head coach for the Iowa women for more than 2 decades, 24 years, announces her retirement seemingly out of nowhere, and in steps Jan Jensen. Of course, we'll talk about Jan here momentarily, but first, Lisa leaves a legacy that is unmatched in Iowa history. She not only makes it to 2 Final Fours in a row, but 2 national championships in a row. Caitlin Clark as the National Player of the Year. Just a phenomenal career for what has been a phenomenal person who has led phenomenal women at the University of Iowa, and it's sad to see her go. Adam, I know you're our beat writer for the women, so just tell us your initial reaction because it seems like everybody was surprised by this decision by Lisa.
Yeah, surprise is the right word, and I would say surprise even more than shock because it sort of came out of nowhere, and if you want a little bit of proof of that, nobody had this pre-written, nobody had this scooped, right? It was everybody's email inboxes chimed at the same time, and if the other reporters are like me, they had to read it 2 and 3 times just to make sure that what they were seeing was actually what was going on. And it says, yeah, like Lisa Bluder has retired, and the first email we got was strictly the statement from Bluder. There was no like bio info. There was no announcement about Jensen or anything else. I mean, just nothing written. Oh, I mean, this stuff is typically, at the very least, co-written by com staff. So I don't want to say like nothing was written by Iowa, but it was all everything that we got in the first email was this is the statement from Lisa Bluder. And she mentioned in the statement that she had notified the University of Iowa brass leadership about that afternoon, Monday afternoon. And so on some level, you sort of have to take her at face value on that the process that she described, which was not only, having the conversations with her students about what was going to come next, and then taking some time off with her husband, David, right? You sort of have to just take her at face value and say, she came to this decision recently. She's good with it. And now it's time to sort of tell the rest of the world. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a surprise, but also we are talking about somebody who has been a head coach for the last 40 years. She's 63 years old, and she is watching an incredible senior class, well, already depart. They have, gone on to greener pastures and the rest of their lives too. So, it is a situation where you can sort of look back on it in retrospect and say, okay, yeah, it makes sense. I'm not stunned. We're not talking about her doing this in the middle of her 40s or early 50s or anything like that. But it is a surprise because at the same time, if she were going to retire, I think a lot of people would have expected it to happen earlier, closer to the end of the season rather than the middle of May. So that is sort of where I land. I'm more surprised than shocked. But Elliot, like you said, she leaves behind an incredible legacy. She gets to leave on her own terms with her health, intact and all that. And maybe not on top, but as close to the top as Iowa women's basketball has ever been. And she is so responsible for that. And the fact that she's leaving the program in the hands of Jan Jensen sort of speaks to how, sort of orchestrated this was, and how eager the University of Iowa was to have that culture around the program as intact as possible.
Ross, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely agree with Adam. Shock is not the right word because, given her age and the, how many years she's been coaching, like it's never shocking when someone like that decides to retire, I think. But the timing is definitely surprising because the middle of May is not, where you would expect an announcement like this versus something closer to the end of the season or anything like that. But I after the initial surprise, I think my next thought was, oh well, who replaces her? And then Iowa answered that within literally 25 minutes of the first announcement about the retirement was that Jan Jensen was replacing her. So it's like there's no time for speculation at all, which is fine, no problem with that. There was the plan and they're comfortable with it, and that's what you want to see in any type of succession situation like this, I think. And that's definitely what we're seeing play out here. But I would echo just what you said at the beginning too, that just very grateful to Bluder for what she's accomplished at Iowa. What she represented that program incredibly well, represented the university and the state incredibly well, especially the last few years when that program, thanks to Caitlin Clark and the incredible success they were having, had an incredible platform, a national platform, international platform, really. I mean, they were getting attention overseas and everything. And she was just a very gracious person in interviews and in post game and everything else. And definitely wish her the best in retirement.
So you mentioned timing, and I have a few other things I want to hit here, but I mean, you land Lucy Olson, right, in the offseason. And like you'd also think that Coach Bluder is not someone to go with the the Coach K tour, like he did at the end of his career. Like she wasn't going to do that, right? I think we all would have assumed that if she was going to call it a career, she would have done that probably after the welcome home ceremony, right? Like just keep it on the focus of the players until everything comes to a close and then she announces, right? So that's what I would have figured. By this timing, it certainly appears that she didn't exactly think it was going to happen this offseason either up until recently, right?
Yeah, that's my read of it. And so it's, we can sort of sit back in retrospect here in the middle of May and say, well, why didn't she do this a month ago? She might not have thought it was time to retire a month ago. And so you don't really get to backdate those sorts of decisions once you come to them too. So yeah, a little bit unorthodox. And if Iowa were finding itself in a situation where it had to do one of these nationwide coaching searches, Beth Getz probably would have told Lisa, like, can you really not give us one more season? But the fact that they had, their succession plan already in place, and it's as smooth a transition as any program could possibly ask for. Yeah, that sort of makes a mid-May transaction, for lack of a better term, that makes it more feasible than if Iowa did not know what was going to come next.
Sorry, I was just going to add in terms of the timing. Did you have something, Elliot, or no? Okay.
I did, but
Yeah.
I was muted. So sorry, guys. Go ahead, Ross. I was like, he just interrupted me. I was halfway through my sentence. Go ahead.
Didn't mean to. I think in terms of the timing, part of me thinks that I think Bluder wanted to make sure that she was leaving the program in a really strong position for the next season. So we see this come after, they do secure that commitment from Lucy Olson out of the transfer portal to shore up, that really big a hole they had in the roster without Caitlin Clark. You get Lucy Olson in house to help fill that void, and it's not Bluder's not going to be coaching her, but Jensen has been doing everything as her right hand for 2 decades, and I'm sure she was very actively involved in recruiting Lucy Olson as well. So there's going to be that comfort level there, when Lucy Olson is here, that okay, Bluder's not here, but it's still Jensen, it's still the rest of that staff and that team. So there's tremendous amount of continuity. So I think the timing in that sense helps, versus if she had retired after closer to the end of the season, when Iowa still had some significant lineup questions that they were hoping to address through the portal. Maybe that would have been more difficult to address.
That is true. And right. Okay. That is a really good point, Ross. You think now is a perfect time, and well, there is no perfect time. Now is a good time in terms of that transition with Jan, right? And she gets comfortable with Lucy. She gets comfortable with this recruiting class that's going to be coming in, because she is so heavily involved in the recruitment of the players that come in. And I do want to get to Jan here, but I want to ruminate a little bit longer on Lisa, and talk a little bit more about this process. Like, prior to whatever it was, like 3:30, 4 o'clock today, how long do you think, like, if somebody's like, how much longer do you think Coach Bluder sticks around? What would have you have said, like 3, 4 years?
I would have said 5 tops, because again, we're talking about somebody who's been a head coach for 40 years, who is approaching her mid 60s. So it's also a situation where she just saw what she described as the best senior class in Iowa women's basketball history graduate. So there are other players coming in. I thought she was going to want to, at the very least, coach Addie Deal, who will be a 2025 recruit, and who are still sort of monitoring for a reaction on her part. It's still 8 p.m. at the time of us recording this, so maybe between now and when people are listening, we'll have seen a Facebook or an Instagram or tweet from Addie, just to say what she thinks about this situation, what she thinks about Coach Jay. Obviously Jensen was heavily involved in recruiting Deal, but so that sort of remains, that aspect of it remains to be seen. But it really didn't seem like a situation where you would expect Bluder to be around for another decade, because at some point, she can look back on everything that she did and say, all right, top 10 in wins in D1 history, winningest Big Ten coach, winningest Iowa coach, obviously, when she's got that. But that includes like beating out Vivian Stringer. So like that's already reaching a very, very high mountain, a lot higher of a mountain than most programs have. So she's got these accomplishments. She had her time with Caitlin Clark, which was, I'm sure, as much of a sea change culturally for her as it was for fans. And ultimately, it's not fair to the rest of the players to say it's all downhill from there, because I don't think it is. I don't think, especially for somebody like Bluder, she has always been of the mindset of, I'm trying to, coach these young women into, being great people, and to have this great culture, and, hopefully to win some games too. But she was never the Final Four bust type of person. She was never the like treat players like property sort of person. So it didn't seem like losing Caitlin Clark would have pushed her out from coaching in and of itself. But you can also sort of see where this sort of feels like the right opportunity, with all these familiar faces leaving, to say, you know what, that was great. And that sort of filled my appetite for what I'm going to be able to accomplish as a coach. But, ultimately she's somebody who has always really had a good sense of context around her career, around, the history of where she came up from. I mean, guys, she had a front row seat for the growth of women's basketball from this like sideshow at best, which is how they treated her program at St. Ambrose, to a viable sport, to a very like popular sport, to a sport that, you know, put itself right shoulder to shoulder with men's ball. And she had a front row seat for all of it. And so on some level, it sort of makes sense that she could say, you know what? I am happy with what I've got, and I'm happy to leave on my own terms here. So it makes sense. But yeah, it to, you know, circle back to your question. Yeah, 5 years tops. Ross, what about you?
Yeah, I would have said the same thing. I wouldn't have anticipated another decade from her. That would have, put her coaching to like, her almost mid 70s. But, I would have thought 3, 4, maybe 5 additional years, just to kind of reap some of the benefits of, especially in recruiting. The Clark era helped Iowa really turn a corner in recruiting and get the attention and commitments of some really big time recruits and have them coming to Iowa City. And I did think that she would, want to coach those girls and see how that would play out. But like you said, the timing of ending it now also makes perfect sense with what she's, that senior class that she's been very close to, them wrapping up their careers at Iowa and everything else. So, Adam.
So you did mention sort of the timing of recruiting and all that, and on some level, I think it is almost better for it, you know, if Lisa were, you know, within 3 years or within 4 years of her retirement, that especially with the caliber of recruits that are lining up for 24, for 25, for 26, that it's almost better for them long term as Hawkeyes for this coaching transition to happen now rather than for somebody like Addie Bjorn or Maddie Greenway or somebody else to commit to a coach who is not going to be there. So at the very least, Jensen's in place, and Jensen has, you know, of course, been involved in their recruitment to begin with. And, you know, Jensen is not the sort of coach where you're like, well, all right, 3 years of her tops. No, like she's locked into place here. And Iowa skipped any of the interim stuff, any of the like, well, we're going to find a candidate. No, they made their choice on Jensen. So now this is more of a stable, long-term situation for these sort of unicorn type recruits that are lining up in these future classes to reaffirm, or to not even reaffirm, to affirm for the first time their commitment to the Hawkeyes.
There's a couple questions here that are pertinent with Coach Bluder and what her decision is and was. And when you read the statement from her, she made it clear that she is not, heading off into the sunset, moving to Hawaii and being done with basketball. She has made it clear that she wants to help the program out as much as possible. And I mean, we've seen her personality. Like she can be media if she wants to. She can be a color announcer if she wants to. She can be on the set of CBS during Women's March Madness, right? Like as the coach that led 2 national championship runner-up teams, the coach that coached Caitlin Clark. She's a legend, and she can firmly place herself as a legend and continue to grow the game, continue to be part of the game. And there was one question from MP Hawk on our premium board about that last part of her statement. She said probably, or whoever it is, probably said it was way too soon to know, but curious what that would look like. Fundraising, or was that just kind of a line to wrap up the statement? Is that a possibility? Like, how can she still be involved with Iowa at this point in time? Like, what capacity would that be in?
Well, yeah, she could sort of be an unofficial ambassador for the program, you know, maybe take the Dallas Clark route and just start showing up to as many sporting events in Iowa City as possible, you know, without really a title involved or anything like that. But no, to actually seriously answer your question, media makes a ton of sense for Bluder, and you know, it would help Iowa's program just for that continued visibility of somebody like that. And, because her Chiron's always going to say, coached Iowa to 500 some wins, or, a career involved, included 24 years at Iowa, Coach Caitlin Clark, any sort of number of things that can remind people consistently who Lisa Bluder is, even after she's done coaching the Hawkeyes. So, it's really going to depend on what her appetite is for media, what her appetite is just for cameras in general. And yeah, fundraising is absolutely on the table. Sort of any number of things. And what's great is Bluder has really earned the right and privilege to sort of set those terms herself. And 24 years in Iowa City, untold heights for the program, and doing it all with such a class and respect to her, a very, very Iowa, state of Iowa brand of class and respect, a dignity, and just sort of good faith all the way around with her. That's somebody who can sort of dictate the terms of how visible or not visible, or how involved or not involved they want to be with the program. Obviously, as long as Coach Jay is good with it too. But my guess is that will not be a very difficult terrain for either of them to navigate in this brave new world. But yeah, I'm curious to see what that actually entails too.
Yeah, I think for me, the example that comes to mind is another, local Iowan that went on to become a legendary coach in their field, and that's Dan Gable. He is the iconic Iowa wrestling coach. He retires 27 years ago, and he has a couple successors at this point, Jim Zaleski and now Tom Brands. But he's still around the program. He's still around Iowa City. He shows up to just about every Iowa dual meet. He's around to serve as kind of that unofficial ambassador to. I mean, for him, it's not just the Iowa program, but it's just the sport in general, because he's such an iconic figure within that sport that he's at all the high school wrestling big events. He's at Olympic wrestling events and other international competitions. But he is also primarily associated with his time as the Iowa wrestling head coach. And so that I think she can occupy a somewhat similar space as kind of that ambassador for the program and the sport, because as Adam mentioned, she's seen firsthand the growth of women's basketball, from very, very humble beginnings to its current better than ever status. So as much as she is passionate about the Iowa program, which she unquestionably is, I think she's also passionate about continuing to grow the sport of women's basketball and helping it flourish. And I can definitely see her occupying that role as showing up in media broadcasts as a commentator, just attending events, and being a spokesperson and a very famous cheerleader for the sport and the program, and things like that. So Adam.
So one thing that, as you mentioned, these sorts of things, I think it would be pretty lucrative for her is to just get on the speaking circuit, because not only has she had this incredible success and did it while managing a high maintenance sounds more derogatory than I mean it, but Caitlin Clark required some investment of time and attention to sort of harness all that energy, and everybody involved in the program will tell you the same thing. That's not a shot at this or that. They all sort of said that. But Bluder ran this program her own way, and in this NCAA and now this transfer portal world where players are often moving multiple times, not only during the course of their career, but sometimes in the course of an off season, and that's sort of legal now. The fact that Bluder went the exact opposite direction and didn't go that LSU route of like, oh, there's a star player, I want her. There's a star player, I want her. There's it. She was always the inclusive one. Bluder was always the everybody in the program matters. Always the we are going to be more than or we're going to be greater than the sum of our parts. Whereas a lot of these programs that just sort of, pluck talent at random end up looking like less. And that's just sort of never been the case for Iowa. And so, that is a sort of a life lesson that would translate very well to, corporate speaking events or this or that. And so there's, that's just another way that Bluder can, take her message out, and it's a good message ultimately, because again, it's not sort of looking at these players in these sort of dark or cynical or practical to the point of like sociopathy, like, and anything like that. It's a like, look at what you got, make the best of it, and you can do incredible things, especially if you have Caitlin Clark in your backcourt, right? Like, you do sort of need the joker for that one. But even if Caitlin Clark had never come to Iowa and Bluder were retiring this year too, and the best that she ever had to show for herself was, going to an Elite Eight with Megan Gustafson, it's still a great message. And she's still being lauded as a hero, because ultimately success with Lisa Bluder was not just about what happened on the court, but with the culture that you built and maintained around them. So she was always beloved, even before Caitlin showed up, will always be beloved. And, that is something that Bluder can take with her for the rest of her life and sort of actively trade on, whether it's as a speaker, whether it's as a media personality, an in-studio host for the tournament, whatever it is, she has that at her disposal, and she can make retirement whatever she wants it to be.
Now, this is a question from Cat Coach that I think that I'll share my opinion on first, and then we'll go to you guys. But it's a question from our premium board and Cat Coach over there. He said, if Caitlin would have come back, would Bluder have come back for one more year? And I think the answer is yes, like unequivocally yes, just based on the success that they had and the possibility of continuing to go, as far as they've gone and maybe even further. I think that's pretty definitive. And I think just the way that they've been paired together for their respective careers to this point. I mean, one thing that I will say that I've heard a little bit is maybe Lisa is just like, this is kind of goes along with retirement, so maybe I'm a little bit redundant here, but just tired like of what the media circus has been, and just the circus in general. Not just the media circus, but like the circus of the fans and the tournament runs and the travel and everything like that surrounding this team the last 2 seasons. Maybe she's just tired. So maybe it would have been, even if Caitlin had stuck around. But yeah, even if Caitlin had stuck around, Lisa still would have retired. Who knows? But like, to me, I think it's an unequivocal yes. Like, it wouldn't have been a thought for Lisa if Caitlin had returned. That's my opinion. I don't have any intel on that, but that would be what I'd think.
Yeah, I think if that were the case, I think it's fair to assume that Bluder would not have sort of hung Caitlin out to dry for her super senior COVID year or anything like that. But also, Caitlin Clark coming back was never a serious option. So I will also sort of zoom back out and sort of caution Iowa fans not to think in those terms, because ultimately it would have been profoundly almost uncompetitive for Clark to come back for year number 5 when she's already got every single individual record you could possibly think of, and had done it in 4 years on the court, rather than taking advantage of a rule change and sort of bending it past what I would say the people who wrote that rule up had in mind. And it really would have opened Caitlin up to a lot of like ducking the WNBA allegations, some really, really strong allegations. So I don't think that Bluder would have recommended that Caitlin come back either. So it's an if with a lot of like, yeah, but. So, but yes, to answer the question, sure, but also it's sort of like asking what would have happened if the baby had stuck around for a 10th month of gestation. Like, at some point it's got to come out, right? Like, that's And that's why I'm not an OBGYN.
So now on to Jan a little bit. I think we've hit it, and Ross, you did a pretty good job of mentioning it and getting to it. But I think this just comes down to to continuity, right? And in a world where things change so rapidly in college basketball and college sports now with the portal, to have this level of continuity is important. It's massive. Sure, you're losing the straw that stirs the drink, right? But to have Jan Jensen, who's been along for the ride for so much of it, step up and lead the way and keep the train rolling is so massively important. And I to me, we had some folks on our board ask about whether or not we'll reach out to recruits and commits and stuff like that to see what they think. And part of me, which obviously that's not my beat, that's you and Braden, Adam, but in my mind it was like, is it even necessary? Like having Jan Jensen step up, who's been such a integral part of the program as well, is massive. And to have her continue this legacy, I just really don't think there was anybody else who you could look to have things continue to roll the way they have been. She's an awesome person. I've only conversed with her once or twice, but by all accounts, this was the right move.
Sorry, Russ, I thought you were going to start talking.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
so,
Go ahead.
So I was typically, when I get asked, or when I had been asked about Jan Jensen during the past couple seasons, people had asked me, is she ever going to be a head coach? And my answer was always, if she wanted to, she would have by now. And Phil Parker is the obvious corollary here. And there are other corollaries in Iowa football history, Bill Brashear, for example. But it really did sort of seem like that window had been open so long that she was just never going to go through it, right? It's not like her 32nd year being Lisa Bluder's assistant was what finally got her qualified for this job, or any head coaching job or anything like that. Like, she is so massively overqualified for being a first year head coach that I figured this day just wasn't going to come. And I'm going to talk about this in a what this means for Iowa basketball post that I'm currently working on. But one thing that I am curious about is who is going to be Jan Jensen's Jan Jensen? Who is going to take care of all of the, no, this is about the basketball sort of things, as opposed to all of the things, Elliot, that you mentioned that are tangential at best to basketball, or tangential at best to coaching. That all of the noise, all of the speaking engagements, or the promotional sort of stuff that you have to do, the travel for recruiting, obviously Jan did some of that too, but ultimately, who is going to be the right-hand person? Who's going to be the lieutenant? Who is going to be the one that sort of laser focuses on, all right, I'm going to improve Hannah's post work today, as opposed to, I'm going to be the one that runs practice today. So I'm curious to see how that rest of the staff approaches these opportunities, because there are some who are sort of coaching under where they belong, just like Jan was for so long. And we've heard how Raina Harmon is in this sort of an incubator program for future head coaches. Is this her opportunity to go ahead and try to make that a reality somewhere? That's an open question. So who wants to stick around in Iowa City now that Bluder's gone and Jensen has, sort of assumed the reins? Obviously, there's going to be a lot more loyalty built into that transition than basically any other possible transitions that would have happened. But what that actually means is really going to be a person by person sort of decision process. And just like the student athletes have now 30 days with the transfer portal window open with this transition, which is, just the NCAA rule, regardless of, how they feel about the promotion, I guess, for lack of a better term. But that does also mean that the assistants sort of get this fresh opportunity to think, is this where I want to be next year? Is this where I want to be 10 years from now? And so obviously they've got a lot of goodwill built up with the program. But just like Bluder said, there is no perfect time to retire. There's also really no perfect time to sort of go your own way and, get a new promotion somewhere else and just really sort of take yourself out of that comfort zone too. So really an open question in terms of how that staff shakes itself out. We will be asking about that at the press conference on Wednesday afternoon. Whether or not we get any substance in that answer at all remains to be seen. My guess is going to be no, because those are, conversations that are just beginning in their infancy now. So I am curious to see how that shakes out and really how, again, how Jensen makes sure she's got a Jan Jensen, the one who, really, is the glue holding this together. And maybe that's Kate Martin. Who knows? It's could be a lot of things, but I'm curious to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, you mentioned it already, but just the fact that, Jan Jensen is, for a first-time head coach, has the most experience and qualifications, I think, to take over as that head coach of just about any first-time coach I can think of, just by virtue of that role that she's had as Lisa Bluder's, right hand and top lieutenant for, 20, 30 years now. Like, she has seen firsthand how the head coaching game can operate and how it can work and what to do, and probably seen some things maybe she doesn't want to do. So I think that experience is invaluable for her. And the only thing that surprised me was that I just wasn't sure if she was like Phil Parker, where Phil Parker just seems like he just wants to coach ball, and that's great. That's all he wants to do. He's phenomenal at it. Nothing wrong with that at all. But nothing also wrong with Jan Jensen and wanting an opportunity to be a head coach either. That's a tremendous opportunity, and obviously it seems like now that she was just waiting for the the right opportunity, and the right opportunity was to succeed Lisa Bluder at Iowa, and not to go her own way somewhere unfamiliar, but rather somewhere where she is extremely familiar with the institution, the administration, the players, the other coaches, everything. There's not the familiarity level here is off the charts. The familiarity and the continuity, like, you just can't. You're never going to find another hire practically with that level of familiarity and continuity than what you can see here, just because you don't see someone stay around as a top assistant for this long, really.
And that to me sort of seems like a credit to Beth Getz, because this is a situation where if Getz had sort of given Jensen or anybody else in the Iowa program the notion that it was not going to be smooth sailing or anything like that, Jensen could have absolutely said, hey, you know what, I'm trying to be a basketball coach more than a head coach, right? Like I enjoyed my role and I'm going to find somewhere else to do that. And nobody would have thought twice. Nobody would have even put that at Getz's feet. But the fact that, given this opportunity, that they handled this transition as smoothly as can possibly be handled. I don't see a world where you can't claim that as a massive credit to the leadership that Getz has provided to the program, not only going into last season and during last season, but into this offseason and next one too.
The kind of, I don't know if resounding is the right word, but a repeated question on our premium board from each of Waterloo, Chaz, Og Hawk, and I believe MP Hawk added it as well, was the question as to whether or not Jan had opportunities elsewhere, and like this was a situation where they made the move because they wanted her to stick around. And I think it was just simply that she's younger than Lisa. She is a loyal Hawk. And this was a position, and this was probably the only position she would have taken a head coaching job at, because this is presumably where she wanted to be. That's just my read of it. I mean, I think, like, I mean, you both said it. If she wanted to be a head coach somewhere else, she would have been by now. She could have gone to UNI. She could have gone to Drake. She could have gone to what have you, probably years ago. And now she has an opportunity to step in and hold this position. And the other thing is, this isn't, and I think you said it a little bit ago, Adam, too. This doesn't strike me as a 3-year transition thing for Jan to eventually retire. She's the head coach of the Hawkeyes, and she's going to be the head coach of the Hawkeyes probably for a decade, right? Like that's my read of it anyway.
Yeah, you don't take a job like this just to have it for a few years. And again, everything that we said about recruiting and the influx of talent that's coming, just like it would have been a little bit weird for Bluder to get all these 24, 25, 26 prospects from the backyard who are phenomenally talented. It would be a little bit surprising if Jensen gets somebody like Maddie Greenway, and then 2 years into that situation is like, all right, I just turned 59 and goodbye. No, like this is, and gosh, all you have to do is just talk to Coach Jay. And what I haven't even looked up what her actual age is, but she has such a boundless energy. 55. Okay, great. She has such a boundless energy for coaching, and gets so much out of the interaction with her players, and seeing them build, seeing them succeed. She Her passion for coaching and for her players is as genuine as possible. So yeah, that is a situation where you almost just don't even look at the age, and you say, this person, this coach has energy for a lot of years yet to come. So yeah, I expect her in Iowa City running the program for at least the next 10 years, provided, again, like the wins and losses take care of themselves, which I think they will, especially if these recruits, really hold up their, I shouldn't say hold up their end of the bargain, but as long as they stay healthy, as long as they keep, buying what Coach Jay has been selling. And we've already sort of seen that with Addie Deal. And, again, like Maddie Greenway, Addie Bjorn, Jenica Lewis from down here in Johnston might be the highest rated of the bunch, right? There's such an opportunity for Jensen to not only continue this wave of success for the Hawkeyes, but to build on it and maybe, just maybe, contend for something even better than a national championship runner-up. Maybe. Again, a lot of things have to go well, and you do sort of have to, lasso another comet like they did with Caitlin Clark, but we know that they can, and we know that they want to. We know that they've tasted it. And we know that the University of Iowa has demonstrated you can be as big of a star as you want in Iowa City in women's basketball. A bunch of other programs will say, hey, we could do that too. Iowa is the program that can say, we've done it. Coach Jay is the coach who can say, I've done it. And so as long as that pitch keeps working, and there's no reason to believe that it won't, Iowa will continue to contend for greatness with Jan Jensen leading the program over the next few years. And no, you would not expect her to look at that as a 3-year project or a 5-year project or anything like that. Even with Jenny Branchick down in Oklahoma, like there is an even younger candidate where you're like, I mean, candidly, guys, when people ask me who the next coach of Iowa women's basketball was going to be, I didn't ever say Jan Jensen. I said Jenny Branchick, nay Jenny Lillis, formerly of Dowling, because it just made so much sense on paper, and I didn't expect Jensen to really want the head coaching job. So now that she's got it, I expect her to stick around and for as long as she wants it, because she enjoys coaching. She enjoys being around these kids. She enjoys the day-to-day of all of this. So I don't expect that enjoyment to cease within the next few years at all.
Now, there was one thing that Ross mentioned right at the top that everybody knows, is that there's about 25 minutes of holy crap, in about 4 seconds of who's going to be the next head coach in Iowa before the hire was made. Now, folks will remember through the offensive coordinator hiring process and the wide receiver coach hiring process that there is a period of time where that job has to be listed. Is there a certain way that there's like a loophole here that the Iowa like administration made this happen, or is that something we're waiting to find out on?
We are waiting to find out. As soon as Jensen was announced, I put in a question to the University of Iowa, just to say, hey, is that something that didn't need to be posted? Is that, and I'm looking for answers from them, because obviously they're going to know what the process is better than I did. But no, like I hadn't seen anything about a job posting or a 2 week or this or that. And they didn't say anything about Jensen being interim. They didn't say anything about a nationwide coaching search to ensue. It was a Bluder's retired. Here's our new head coach. That's that. And if that's allowed, great. You know, and on some level, I mean, we ask because you do sort of trust but verify is the popular term. Like on some level, you do sort of have to trust that the university with a staff of lawyers, a very in a public university no less, will be following the rules that are set out for them. You know, they're subject to terms of FOIAs as much as anything else, but that is a question that we have put into Iowa, and as of 8:58 p.m. has not come back in my email inbox. So as soon as we find out, we'll let you know. And I'm sure that's going to come up if at the latest at the press conference on Wednesday afternoon, because it's an open question, just like you said.
The other thing we got to hit here, and I'll go to you first, Ross, on this, is the hire by Beth Getz. I mean, this is something that we talked about surrounding Getz and her hire when she was made the full-time AD, is that she's going to have 3 monumentous hires in her tenure as the athletic director at Iowa. Kirk Ferentz, Fran McCaffrey, and Lisa Bluder. I don't think any of us thought it was going to be Lisa Bluder that was going to be the first one to retire, but here we are. And seemingly to this point, she's knocked it out of the park with a hire in Jan Jensen. Now, was that handed to her on a silver platter? Is one question. But this is a pretty good start, right, Ross?
Absolutely. I would also add, I would actually put it at 4 momentous hires that she's going to have to make, because Tom Brands, the wrestling coach, is also going to be retiring at some point. And he's had tremendous success here. So he'll leave some big shoes to fill. But yeah, I mean, when you've had 4 head coaches at, your 4 biggest sports, and they've all been here for 10 plus years, and pretty close to 20 or more for Ferentz, Brands, and Bluder, those are, we knew when she was hired that this was going to be something she was going to have to do. Was she was going to be tasked with finding their replacements, which is a enormous task. And you're right. And I don't think any of us expected that Bluder would be the first one that she would be replacing. And it definitely did not hurt that there was such a good succession plan in place with Jensen. It's still an open question on how Beth Getz would handle a national coaching search, because she did not have to do that here. The candidate that she wanted and that everyone wanted was right there on staff, wanted the job. Bing, bang, boom, here we are. But it seems like a phenomenal fit. It seems like the right hire at this time for sure. And yeah, I mean, I think this worked out as well as I think Beth probably could have hoped for on most levels. As much as I know, I don't think you ever really want to go through that coaching search. It's always a little difficult, especially when you're, replacing a legend like Lisa Bluder. It's not a easy or necessarily desirable position, but it's a necessary one too. And yeah, so this is the first of what will probably be many big hires that Beth Getz has to make. And so far, 1 for 1, batting 1,000. So not a bad start.
Speaking of batting 1,000, let's also throw Rick Heller into the mix, because he is a guy who, at the very least, you got to put way, way high up on the list of great Iowa baseball coaches. And he's also getting up there in age too. So that's a hire where Iowa is trying to ride this little crest of success. And obviously they've had some recent difficulties with fundraising that's going to make sustaining that success a little bit more difficult unless they can figure out what's going on with Dwayne Banks Field. But that's another situation where, I mean, we're talking about a fifth sort of Hall of Fame caliber coach that Getz is going to have to replace. And really, of those five, if there's any doubt or if there's any question as to sort of Hall of Fame worthiness or not, Fran's the only one, and I am more permissive to sort of Hall of Fame talk with him than most people are, because ultimately, the lack of Sweet 16 success is like one measure of how successful a coach is. And I think if you look at Fran's resume as a whole, if I were running a Hall of Fame, I would be happy to have him in it too. So that is it's a great situation to walk into, but Ross, like you said, that's a lot of greatness and a lot of familiarity with Iowa City across a lot of sports that matter a whole lot that Getz is going to have to replace. And so you do sort of have to give her credit for taking the layup that she was given and not making it more difficult, or not sort of turning it into this sort of protracted civil war between Baranchik and Jensen, and there's so many ways that this could have gone wrong. And just ask any Iowa fan that's been around long enough to remember sort of the worst impulses of Gary Barta. Like, are we 100% sure that he would have handled it as smoothly as this has gotten? Are we absolutely positive about that? Because guys, I'm not. I'm not saying it would have been worse. Because for all I know, he would have been like, oh, yep, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. But oh, that is a big old question mark to me. What do you guys think?
I mean, having had a firsthand seat to Gary Barta's job performance for a decade plus, I think you're right that we can't assume that he would have made this as smooth a transition as we're seeing right here. You'd hope it would have been, but I don't think that's a locked in stone guarantee. So.
Yeah. Retweet. I don't know. I haven't been around covering the Hawks as long as you guys have, but based on everything I've heard, read, and seen, that tracks. Anyway, not the last of the women's basketball news today, as Kate Martin makes the opening day roster for the Las Vegas Aces. A lot of folks counted her out, said she was just second fiddle to Caitlin Clark, but here she is on a WNBA opening day roster, and the reigning WNBA champions, correct?
Yeah, it's I think now we have to sort of look at Candace Parker's retirement from the Aces as sort of a sign that she was afraid to compete with Kate Martin for that roster spot. That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. Don't jump down my throat. But no, that is, I mean, look, making a WNBA roster as a second round pick is pretty long odds for any player, any draft class, into any franchise. And so for Kate Martin, who did not come into the season as a viable WNBA draft pick, really played her way into it this year. And a big part of that was taking on more of a scoring leadership role. She had always been a, vocal leader, the glue, the money. But she really came into her own as a spot up jump shooter this year. And that, if you want to make the pros, you better do something, at least one thing, really, really well. And the fact that Kate Martin became this really like knockdown, like don't leave her open on the perimeter type of shooter, I think really went a long way in terms of making her more viable for a WNBA roster. And the fact that she got drafted by Becky Hammon, like as good a coach as you could possibly ask for, and the sort of coach who is going to see all of the gifts that Martin has like mentally for this game, can see how quick a learner she is and how well she can ingratiate herself into this Aces system. And so, yeah, that was, I would surmise, guys, that if Kate Martin were drafted by most other teams in the WNBA, she would have been cut by now, because that probably would not have been her getting set up for success the way that she was getting drafted by Hammond, by the Aces, and really a situation where she can learn from a great coach, figure out what her role is going to be, not try to do too much on top of that, not have a bunch of expectations on her as a, like, well, we don't see her as a future 20 point a game scorer, so, you know, like, she didn't have to be a potential like winning lottery ticket for her to be useful to a program or excuse me, a franchise that is as well developed as the Aces. So she was, I would say, a little bit lucky in terms of where she got drafted, but then the great ones make the best of their own luck, and that's certainly what we saw here, and really a reflection of the work that she put in as a Hawkeye, as a teammate, and you know, sort of demonstrated that value to the Aces. So again, a little bit surprised, honestly, yeah, but not shocked, because it makes a lot of sense. And she's always been that good of a teammate, and now she's got the skills to show for it, and now she's got the WNBA roster spot to show for it.
Talk about
Yeah,
adding
I
something to
mean,
the coaching resume. That's all I needed to say there. Go ahead, Ross.
yeah, I was just gonna say, backing up what Adam said, I think in hindsight, the Aces drafting her probably points toward a better likelihood of her making the roster, because if they, especially in the second round, like, I think people were surprised that she went in the second round. So the fact that they were willing to take her there, it definitely in hindsight suggests that they saw, or Becky Hammond saw a path for her to make that team, that there would be that opportunity maybe. So but obviously, Kate Martin went out and seized that opportunity and proved that she did deserve one of those 12 roster spots. So that's phenomenal for her. I think for Iowa fans, the Aces probably have to be either your favorite or second favorite team, because they've got Kate Martin and Megan Gustafson now. So it's a lot of Hawkeye on one WNBA roster, and obviously, Caitlin Clark's on the Fever, so that's probably going to be most Iowa fans' primary WNBA rooting interest. But the Aces are not to be ignored for Iowa fans for sure. So, Adam, what were you going to add there?
Just going to point out for all the people and sort of newer WNBA fans, Saturday, May 25th, Aces versus Fever, Hawkeye on Hawkeye violence. And for those in the state of Iowa, the Des Moines and Quad Cities markets, that will be over the air on ABC. So you don't even need the WNBA League Pass or cable or anything like that for it. It will be on local TV. So Saturday, May 25th, 8 p.m. Central. Fever, Aces, get it.
Isn't there a woman who's from Iowa on the Aces too? Like
Yeah,
originally
it's
from
either
Iowa?
Kia or Kaya Stokes, and I always forget how to pronounce it. But yeah, the daughter of former Iowa All-American Greg Stokes is the only Iowa native on the Aces roster with two Hawkeyes on it. But yeah, she went to Linn-Mar High School. Now this is going to be her, I believe, her 9th year in the WNBA. She started about half the games for the Aces last year. She's very much a defensive first player rather than a scorer. I believe her season stats were something like 2 points and 6 rebounds per game last year. But, she's somebody who is a big part of that rotation, really helps shore up their defense. And look, when you're playing next to Jackie Young, you're playing next to, oh, now I'm absolutely blanking on the Kelsey Plum. I mean, you name the amount of talent that they've got on that Aces roster. You kind of don't need to score. Like, it's a great situation to walk into. Like, all right, I'm rebounding, and what else? I'm blocking shots, and what else? Excuse me, that's it. And I get a ring for that, just like everybody else. All right, done, set. Like, So it's a great situation for really all players involved, and that's going to go for not only Stokes but Gustafson and Martin too. Like they can focus on what makes them great, and they've got unbelievable amounts of talent around them to lean on for the heavy lifting of scoring and ball distribution and all that. So, yeah, I mean they are. That is really the gold standard of franchises in the WNBA, and the fact that there's 2 Hawkeyes and a native Iowan on that roster. Gosh, that's really, really easy to cheer for if you're from around here, I would say.
Now, not just women's basketball news going on right now. Seydou Traore, still working on the pronunciation of that name, from Manhattan, who is in the portal, was on an official visit to Iowa Sunday night through Tuesday morning. Tomorrow morning, if you're listening here this evening on YouTube, watching on YouTube, his visit will wrap up tomorrow, and we've got a nugget on the premium board at iowa.rivals.com that you do not want to miss regarding his visit. So head over there. If you're not a premium subscriber yet, you can do that today at iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. We've also got a list of players, recruits in the 2025 class who I believe could be next to commit. That's following Drew McPherson's commit, who was also future casted. Premium subscribers knew that multiple days before he made his announcement that he would be a Hawkeye. We've also got another future cast in that article of players who could be next to commit, who I believe will be Hawkeyes. Again, you can check that out at iowa.rivals.com. If you're not a subscriber yet, do that today. We'd love to have you there and on our premium board. It's iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. Do that today. Before we get out of here, make sure that you hit that subscribe button there on YouTube. Drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know what you think of that hire of Jan Jensen, Kate Martin making the roster, and what you're looking forward to most with Jan Jensen as the next head coach of Iowa women's basketball. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, you might be listening but not subscribed. So make sure you subscribe today. Don't miss an episode there. Once again, my name is Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter, your recruiting analyst to host at the site, joined by publisher Adam Jacoby and Ross Binder on this evening episode of HawkCast. We appreciate you tuning in. For now, we will see you next time.